Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Executive Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder, this is a video conference. Per Bagley-King requirements, all cameras must be kept on during the duration of the meeting. If you're not able to have your camera on, you must indicate a reason for your non-appearance during the meeting. Please be aware that, please be aware of the surroundings behind you. All committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar's website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable transcript. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Can we do roll call, please?
Yes. Connolly?
Here.
Alceroff?
Here.
Escobedo?
Here.
Milrod?
Here.
Blakemore?
Here.
Elkin?
Here.
Judge Rosie? All right, I'll make a note of our liaisons. I'm sorry, Kim, do you see any other liaisons in the attendee pool by chance?
This is Marilyn, Melanie. Or Klein.
Hi, I'm here, Melanie Snyder from the Judicial Council.
Thank you so much. Okay. I also see Selena.
Present.
All right. And then I'll make a note of State Bar staff. And then Kim, if you also see Erica Doherty in the poll, could you please promote her as well? Thank you. All right. I'll make a note of State Bar staff present. We have 5 members present and have quorum.
Great, thank you guys so much. So just as a heads up, I unfortunately in my other job got a important work call put on at 1:30. So we're gonna try to rearrange the schedule a little bit to try to see if we can get through as much as we can within the first hour and a half. I know everyone really loves keeping these things going super long, but hopefully we can kind of get through them. If we need to stay longer than 1:30, I can be late to my other call, but we're just going to try to fit it in a little bit. Okay, so on that note, let's go ahead and turn to public comment. And why don't we do it at 3 minutes? And just a reminder that comments need to be, related to our agenda items or within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Trust Fund Commission. So do we have any live public comment?
We have one person. Hold on one second.
Great, you can promote them.
Yeah, they should be able to speak now.
Hi, good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Joy Bell, and I'm a parent advocate navigating multiple systems on behalf of my son who has autism. By the way of background, I sought assistance from Legal Rights Learning Center to address serious and ongoing failures in my son's education, including lack of services, placement issues, and violations of his rights under IEP with LAUSD. Like many families, I turned to a nonprofit legal organization with the understanding that their services were grant funded and accessible without financial burden. However, during that process, a $27,000 lien was placed on my case in connection with a proposed settlement agreement with LAUSD, an agreement that I did not sign. At that time, I raised concerns regarding the handling of my case, including feeling pressured to accept a settlement that I believe was not in my child's best interest and being left to proceed alone after declining that settlement. These concerns were formally submitted and became part of the State Bar's oversight process. The Office of Chief Trial Counsel ultimately close the complaints based on the threshold required for disciplinary action. However, that determination does not resolve the underlying concerns, and I'm actively seeking further review at a higher level to ensure that those issues are fully evaluated. Separately, the Office of Access and Inclusion conducted a grant compliance review under Rule 3.692, focusing specifically on whether Learning Rights Law Center met its obligations as a publicly funded legal services provider. I want to acknowledge Christopher McConkey, Colleen Sato, and Erica Carroll for their diligence through that process. Through their oversight, there was a direct engagement with the organization, detailed review of the complaint, and extensive inquiry into compliance with grant requirements. As a result of that oversight, Learning Rights Law Center has now confirmed on the record they will not pursue the $27,000 lien and will not bill me for those services. That outcomes matters, not just for me, but for every parent who relies on a nonprofit legal services in good faith. Because access to justice cannot come with uncertainty, fear, or risk of financial harm. Thank you for your time today, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Appreciate your comments. And I echo that the staff, I think, did an excellent job working on this issue. Any other public comment?
No one else has their hand raised.
Okay, I will note just for the recording that we received, Crystal, was it 5 or 6 written public comments in support of the staff's recommendation for the IOLTA distribution recommendation supporting us recommending that distribution to the full commission. And hopefully everyone on the XCOM has had an opportunity to see those, but they were all pretty consistent in support of the staff's recommendation. Okay, if we are done with public comment, I'd like to move to the first voting matter, which is we're actually going to skip over to agenda item number 4, which is the open session minutes. And 4.1 is the approval of the January 29th minutes. Any concerns with the minutes?
Catherine moves approval.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That was a need?
Yeah.
Great. Go ahead and take a vote.
Right, Blakemore,
Yes.
Falcon,
Yes.
sorry, was that a yes?
Was, yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, Judge Rosie, Escobedo,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Elsaroff,
Yes.
Connolly.
Yes.
All right, that's 6 yeses, 0 no's, motion passes.
Great. Let's move into agenda item 5, which is the business for today. And the first thing we're going to do is have a presentation on our report and audit of our grant awards pursuant to Business and Profession Code section 622 and 6210.5G. And I believe this is some folks from NGO that are going to talk with us about the results of the audit, which we really appreciate you coming in.
Hello, good afternoon. Let me share my screen first. Kim, I wanted to ask you, is Annie here?
Who?
Annie, she's the one presenting from MGO.
Any? Oh, yeah. Hold on. You want me to promote her?
Yes, please.
She should be.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esteban Cano. I'm a senior financial analyst with the Office of Access and Inclusion. Today, we are presenting the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission grants audit required under the Business and Professions Code section 6210.5G. These provisions requires the State Bar to develop a program to audit a representative sample of grant awards made by the Commission each year to ensure those awards are consistent with applicable statutes, rules, and other governing authority. For 2025, MGO reviewed the selected grant awards and will walk us through the results of that audit today. I also want to briefly note that there is a separate Legal Services Trust Fund operating statement required under the Business and Professions Code section 6222. That report is part of the State Bar audited financial statement and unfortunately was not finalized in time to be included in today's XCOM meeting. It will be presented at the next Board of Trustees meeting on May 14, and once it has been presented there, we will make sure to share it with all of you. With that, I will turn it over to Annie from NGO to present the results of the 6210.5G grants audit. Annie, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annie Louie. I'm the engagement partner on this engagement. Mr. Ron, if you can please move on to the next slide for the content for today's presentation. I'll cover briefly three things about the agreed upon procedures. First of all, I want to go over the whys, what an AUP is and how it relates to an audit or differs from an audit, and then I'll go into the scope and results of the agreed upon procedures for the commission. If we can please go to the next slide. So the next slide is a quick highlight of what an agreed upon procedure or AUP is. And I do want to highlight that because it differs in many ways from an audit. So as Ron has said, there is a separate financial statement audit for the Legal Services Trust Fund. The report presented to you today relates to compliance procedures with the grant funding or grant application process. Very generally, what an agreed upon procedure does is basically performing or applying specific procedures that are agreed upon with management to the subject matter. And the largest difference to an audit is that it may be narrow in scope, is very defined on what the stakeholder needs may be, such as compliance requirements, maybe it's for investigative purposes, looking for specific transactions or areas. And in many ways, it could be more cost effective because it is focused on these specific issues at hand. Going on to the next slide. How does that relate to the Legal Service Trust Fund AUP that we perform? So what we were engaged to do is to look into the grant application process, verifying that the procedures were followed and the allocations, or excuse me, the grants that were subject to this particular review this year included allocations of the IOLTA funds and the Equal Access Fund, and also any pro bono allocations of those grants as well. And there was also a good list of competitive grants that were subject to the engagement. The report that is included in the packet specifies the specific procedures that were performed. And in terms of the reporting, if we noted any deviations at all, that would be reported to you under an agreed upon procedure. And if no exceptions were noted, meaning that we found the procedures were followed, then there would be no exceptions reported. And this particular engagement, you probably know, covered all the awards that were granted or approved in calendar year 2025. So going on to the next slide, please. This is an illustration of the report looks like, and you have the complete report in your package. So as you can see here that we did not have any exceptions as a result of applying the procedures to the selected grants. And the report itself goes into further details on how samples were selected and the specific procedures that were performed. So with that, I'd like to conclude my quick presentation and see if you have any questions that I can answer for you.
Catherine, did you have a question?
I did. So I know in regular audits, separate from exceptions or findings, that there's sometimes recommendations. So I just wanted to ask whether there had been any recommendations made. I appreciate the fact that there were no exceptions. So thank you.
Okay. So normally there aren't recommendations as Parliament agreed upon procedures. As I said, the scope is basically performing what was agreed upon. There are certain instances or situations where you may want recommendations. In this particular case, that wasn't part of the scope. But I can tell you from performing the procedures that, I don't think there's anything that I would change. And the procedures are sound, very straightforward, and consistently applied.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. If there is no any other questions, I think we can just go ahead and wrap up this agenda item.
Great. I'll just add my 2 cents, which is to say, thank you so much for the work on the audit and for presenting it to us, and also many thanks and appreciation to staff for performing, the way that you're supposed to and resulting in a clean audit on this one. So we look forward to seeing the financial one when it's ready.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all so much. Okay. Let's move to the next part, which is 5.2, which is an update regarding our trust fund commission appointments. And I'm going to give that one over to Dwan.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon there. I just have a quick update on where we're at on the appointments cycle. So as you all know, the commission has some seats to appoint, and then also the board of trustees. Last year, there were no openings. This year, we have 4 between the board and the commission. So the board will be appointing 1 new commission member, and the trust fund commission will be appointing three new commissioners. And as you recall, the appointments for both the board and the commission are on the same application, and then how it looks in terms of review is a little bit differently. The board will be voting on its appointment in July, and then the commission doesn't vote on its appointments until August. So let me talk a little bit about procedurally where we're at on the board appointments. So we received the application now. We're reviewing them. What happens next is Erica and Amin will, including myself, will participate on interviews, and then we will advance a slate of recommendations to our liaisons, and then we have board liaisons that have recommendations that will then be presented to the Board of Trustees for approval in July. And then as far as the commission appointments, we're really at the beginning of that phase right now. And Amin and Erica will send out an email to let you all know who will be participating in that interview process. But most likely when Erica and me and I talk, it will most likely be Erica and Amin, just for efficiency's sake, since they're already participating with the board, so that we don't have to re-interview kind of candidates. We have a really good slate of applicants. We're really excited about that. So we will bring forward our recommendations at the next XCOM meeting for the 3 commission appointments. The Judicial Council is on a separate track. However, we have been coordinating with them, and usually their track is a little bit gets extended a little bit, so we won't usually hear about appointments for the Judicial Council until later in the year. As you'll recall, the Judicial Council also makes appointments for the officer position, so we'll know later who the chair and the vice chair will be. And then we also have appointments from the legislature, and we're trying to sort out those because there are a couple commissioners that are terming off this year, and hopefully they'll be reappointed, but we'll have more of an update substantively on that later this year. So that's where we're at on appointments. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
So Dwan, I'm one of the people appointed by the legislature, and I provided Crystal, I think, with the information about the status of things. Is there other information that you need?
No, we're just waiting for that. It's Judge Klein is also the other appointments, and there was a complication in his appointments letter, so we're trying to figure that out, and then we'll have a report back.
Okay. I just was trying to make sure you didn't need anything from me.
No. Thank you though for connecting us with the liaison there.
Great. Okay. Thank you guys, and thanks to Amin for joining me and doing interviews shortly. Okay, now let's move to our next business matter, which is the approval of the 2027 IOLTA distribution and recommendation to the Trust Fund Commission of the same. And I'll turn that one over to Dwan and Monica.
Thank you. And I want to introduce Monica. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Everyone, my name is Monica Lee. I'm the Principal Financial Analyst in the Office of Finance. So joining Dwan today on the IOLTA distribution for 2017.
So every year I work with some of the finance staff. So Monica and Michael and I have worked together to some from the projections that are in your memo and that we're going to go over right now. But Monica is all the numbers person. So if you have any specific questions on how we came up with the calculation, Monica can help us answer. But I prepared a short PowerPoint. There's a lot more information in your materials. The memo's pretty detailed, and all the attachments are really informative. There's a lot of historical information in there if you want to get a little bit more in the weeds, but I'll just provide really more of a high level so we're all on the same page.
And Monica will be sharing screen.
Okay, thank you, Monica.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Okay.
Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll just go over kind of key dates, a little bit of background on the IOLTA statute, where the revenue streams are coming from, a reminder on our reserve policy, and then we'll get into the last half of the meat of it will be on the IOLTA projections and what the staff recommendation is. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit of a background on where we're at in terms of rates. For this year, there's been a couple Federal Reserve meetings, actually one yesterday. We were tracking pretty closely to see if there was going to be any rate change. So far, there was a January, a March, and then the April 29th meeting that happened yesterday, and there was no rate change. So we're at 3.75%. The commission the ExCom is meeting today, obviously, to vote to advance a recommendation that will then go to the commission at the May 29th meeting. That recommendation then goes to the Board of Trustees in July. And then we will then notify our grantees as to what the amount is. The last kind of box there shows you kind of all the remaining Federal Reserve meetings. And you'll see in a future slide that if you go with the staff recommendation of the kind of the middle projection, we are projecting 2 rate drops this year that will bring us down 0.25% at each of those drops. So we're projecting for rates to be at 3.25% by the end of the year. And I don't know if you've been following, but if you open up the New York Times article, there's been a lot of news in terms of like what's happening at the Federal Reserve. We know that they will have a new chair. Jerome Powell's staying on as part of the governors. So there's just a lot of volatility with everything happening. So again, I think you hear me say this every year. It's just a very difficult environment to kind of project interest rates and where they will be, but we've done the best we can. Next slide. And it's just a quick reminder that we call them IOLTA grants because the bulk of the revenue is in our IOLTA interest revenue that we hold, but there are a couple other streams of funding there, including donations and investment income. Next slide. And just a little bit background, again, the memo goes in this at more detail. As you recall, in the early 80s, the Business Professions Code was codified to allow the state bar to kind of collect remittances on IOLTA accounts and then distribute them as legal aid grants. By statute, attorneys are required to hold into interest-bearing IOLTA accounts when those funds are nominal or short-term. Again, the statute regulates attorneys and not banks. And the last time this section of the statute was amended was in 2008 to allow for comparability. And what that means is that banks since 2008, are now required to provide us with similarly comparable rates comparable rates products for our revenue. So that has really helped, particularly in the last few years when interest rates have been high. And then the other reminder is the Leadership Bank Program was created in 2019, and there's an agenda item following this that Sylvia is going to present on some of the research and analysis that Sylvia and I have done in regards to Leadership Bank Program and what more we can do to kind of bolster that program. Next slide. And then just a reminder, the commission a couple years ago did go to change how awards were distributed and also the reserve policy. So we used to have project 2 years out in order to make an award determination. Now we're projecting pretty much 3 quarters out. So how it works practically is for our 2027 distribution, we have revenue for January and February, and then we need to make a projection through 2026, and everything that we project from actual for the 2 months plus the projection for the remainder of the month, that's what gets distributed in 2027. Before then, it would be like 2 years out, and it would be, I mean, it's already now hard to project out 3 quarters, but if you can imagine, we used to have to project out 7 quarters, and that made it really difficult. And so the commission did go to revise that policy in 2023. And then the other update was the reserve, the how much we put in reserve. It used to be a very formulaic on how you determine the reserve. Now it provides the commission with a lot of discretion. So the commission can choose to, set aside $25 million and can adjust that for inflation. And then also there is a provision that under special circumstances, you can also raise that cap to $40 million. In the last few years, since we've adopted this new reserve policy, the commission has decided to set aside or maintain a $25 million reserve. And that is the recommendation again for this upcoming cycle. Next slide, please. Again, the next couple slides just have more historical information in a kind of a graph or table format. If you want more granular information, the attachments in your packet will have them. So you'll see here our IOLTA, our EF, our partnership, other grants in the total. And as you all know, our grant funding streams have really just taken off in the last 5 years. We've been distributing really kind of record-breaking amounts at 217 million, 252 million. But the big takeaway from this that you'll recall is that right before the pandemic, we had a year where we distributed 2020, 55 million, and that was a high watermark. And before then, we were distributing like around 30 million, 20 million, and even less than that prior to 2015. So just as all as a context for the commission and also the community that these are really historic rates that we're distributing. So obviously we need to plan for them carefully, and programs should, we remind programs this all the time too, because they're historic rates. When interest rates starts to drop, we are not going to be able to maintain at a $200 million or $195 or even $150 million kind of distribution. Next slide. Okay, and this is the amount of IOLTA funds that's been distributed. And again, it follows the same kind of trend as kind of other grants. They've been historical the last few years. And the next slide is kind of the interest rates. And you'll see that they have kind of fluctuated in the last few years, particularly you see 2023 at 5.5%. Those, and we lag a little bit in our collection, so that's why our record breaking was in 2024, the kind of the distribution amount. Okay, so this slide I want to stay on a little bit because this is where it gets into kind of how we calculate our distribution for 2027. So as kind of a baseline, a starting point, is we look at kind of what our net ending assets are at the end of 2025, and you'll see there that number circled in red is a little bit vague there. It's about $28.7 million. So we projected about we are over $28.7 million. So we have a little bit, you can think of it as a surplus to kind of add into the 2026 distribution. And one of the reasons why this projection, it was really volatile last year. We actually thought interest rates were going to go down third quarter of last year, and it did never play out. There wasn't an interest rate drop, and that's why our projections came out a lot stronger at the end of the year there. So kind of think about that $28 million as an additional amount that's going to be added to 2026. And Monica, I don't know if you want to say anything else on this slide, or maybe I'll take a pause here and see if people have questions.
No, I think what you had is good.
Okay, then we can go to the next slide. Okay, so before we get to the numbers, these are kind of the built-in kind of assumptions that Monica and Michael and I used to kind of was foundational to do the projections. So we are assuming that revenue is going to continue to decline because of interest rates. We are also expecting interest rates to stay steady for the next couple of years, and they won't start to dip until later in the year. We have projected investment income, and you'll see that range there, a low of 5.88 and a high of 6.9. Voluntary donations there, there's a little bit of a band there as well. And the other thing to note that's important is interest rates help kind of drive our revenue, but the other big factor that helps drive our revenue is the number of bank deposits. So at the last few years, we've been trending upwards on this. Other states have not. There's not really a great reason why. I mean, we have some theories, and there's a lot of litigation, so there's a lot of money there tied in IOLTA banks. We are projecting that they kind of hold steady at about I think it's a little bit more of $8 billion, and that fluctuates quarterly depending on when banks are paying for us and how much there's in the account. But it's generally around $8 million. So we are holding steady on that projection. And then we are also then recommending for you all to maintain a $25 million restricted reserve. And the main driver of that reason is there's still a lot of volatility. And if rates do drop in the next couple of years, you'll have a little bit of money there to kind of draw from to bolster up IOLTA distribution. Monica, am I leaving out anything on the assumptions?
No, you got it all.
Great. Okay. So the next, go for it.
So I know in the past when we looked at the projections, there was an estimate, about the amount of money on deposit, and that it had varied. And so I guess I'm like, is 8 million kind of the average of what was in deposit in the prior years, or how did we come? I'm just trying to understand the 8 million, because in the past that was a factor and assumed reductions in the 8 million. Or billion.
And I misspoke. It's 8 billion.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, Monica can help explain that piece on how we.
Yeah, 8 billion was the average for 2025 on a monthly basis. So that's what we used to factor in our projection for this year.
Okay, and what can you remind us what it was like in 2024?
2024, actually, let me pull it up. Let me see if I have that information. Quick.
I don't know the 2024 amount, but I do know with the pandemic, we were like a 7 billion, 7.5. So it has definitely gone up. But Monica perhaps.
Yeah, give me a second. I may have that somewhere.
And I appreciate it's average for 2025. Was it, I just want to make sure it wasn't like dropping at the end of 2025, or it was pretty consistent?
We took that into consideration too. We actually did try to slice it different ways, because depending on when there's banks that pay to us on a quarterly and on a monthly basis, and then how they kind of calculate their interest kind of is variable. So we slice it a different way, and it's all trending upwards. So that's the main takeaway, and I think we landed on this average that Monica can speak to.
Okay, so what was the range roughly then for last year, if that was the average?
Oh, sorry.
And thank you for the 24 number. I saw that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the 25 numbers? Oh, you want the average for the bank balance?
No, I see the average is 8 billion, right? That's what Dwan was saying, but I was just trying to understand the range,
8 to, it's typically around 8 billion, sometimes during the quarterly, closer to 10 billion. So, but only because those are just the quarterly where the banks are playing on the quarterly basis. So around 8 to 10, but usually around 8 million should be the standard in our portfolio.
And we can, Catherine, we can take a closer look at that and then email it to you.
Sure. I know in the past, including last year when we did this, it was always a point of discussion about what was the amount on deposit and what impact was that expected to have. And this seems driven just by the interest rates and the proposed reductions. So I guess I'm just interested in understanding that set of numbers from 2025. I mean, since we're talking about billions, not millions, $2 billion actually makes a not insignificant difference, I'm assuming, in terms of the amount generated. So that's the reason for the question.
And one thing you did key in on that I should have said out loud is we did take a little bit of a different approach this year. In past years, when we did the 3 projections for you guys, we did that was variable. That 8 billion, you're right, Catherine. So in this instance, we have seen it trend up. We just isolated it and had it a fixed amount. We thought that would be a little bit easier. But this is why this recommendation is coming to, it used to be that our distribution recommendation would come directly to the commission, but this is why now it goes to the XCOM. So that is something that is helpful for like the next iteration before we get to the commission, then we're happy to kind of do a different projection for you. But
I just think it's sort of the consistency of the projections, right? So if the trend really is 10 billion and not 8 billion, that seems like that would make a difference. So that's why anyway, it's just different to me. And I thought there was this agreed upon looking at both of those factors. At least that's how it was described in the past.
So we isolated it as that 8 billion pretty much fixed across the three assumptions. But if the commission would like us to take a little bit of different approach, then we can.
I think it's just a data point that it would be helpful for the commission to have. So if there's a quarterly data point or the range or something like that, just so we have kind of the same information that we've had in prior years.
And I don't know if that's easy to do right now, Monica. If not, then we'll have to supplement.
Yeah, I'm not asking. I appreciate, like, I'm asking for something that isn't as easy to gather. So maybe it could just be included with the commission information.
Absolutely.
And then I just want to clarify, 2025 is about 8 billion. It ranges from like 7 to 8 billion. Sorry, I misspoke earlier, not 10 million, 10 billion. So 2025 is like 7 to 8, and then 2024, somewhere around like high 6, maybe 7 to 8 billion. So fairly close.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, so I think we're on to the next slide.
I think there's hands from Selena and Efrain.
Yeah, Efrain has a question, and then Selena or a comment.
Yeah, I can defer. My question was more informational, so it was just some questions about our restricted reserve policy. That's it. But I'll withdraw my question. I'm fine.
Okay, Selena.
I just have a couple questions about the numbers to make sure I understand them. I note that the legal services voluntary fee donations has gone down from the 2025 to 2026. And I just want to clarify, it's not the total amount that's gone down. It's that more is set aside for summer funding because of the increase.
It's both, Selena, but are you looking at, do you want to, Monica, would you toggle back to, I think it's slide 10. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, because I believe when the Trust Fund Commission originally approved the budget, it may have been before the carve out for summer funding was made. And so I just wanted to find out, and not today, but before the committee, I think it would be interesting to find out what the total voluntary fee donation amount is, so that we understand whether attorneys are opting out more, or it's just that more of it is being used for another grant within your system.
Well, there's more, it's both, but I don't have the exact figure. But there was a little bit of decrease. It wasn't that meaningful. I just can't remember the top of my head. We can pull that number and have it for you. Unless Monica has that at her fingertips, she may not though.
It's fine. I'm just trying to figure out, are people opting out more, and like what can we do to make them not opt out?
People are opting out more, but it's not a meaningful amount, but we can share that with you to see. But it is trending down a little bit.
The other question is about what is known, or what would be known by the full commission meeting. Oftentimes in the revenue, you have some that is known and some that's still projected. By the full commission meeting, will you have the January to March known revenue?
That's a Monica question. We have Monica?
Yeah, so we should be able to have the January to March revenue by then.
Great, because I think that would help. Because also the Justice Gap Fund donations, I know that is a mix of sometimes there's a Cypre award, sometimes there's not, sometimes there's other random contributions. So it would help if by the full commission meeting, you had information on what had been generated from January to March, if there had been any Cypre awards coming in. Because that's hugely variable, I know that.
Yeah, so we can update on the revenue side, but off the top of my head, the Cypre, we are expecting a few, but they're not large amounts. Okay. So, but we will wrap them in if it comes through in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
But I also want to mention that Cypre is excluded from our projection this year.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Monica, for that. So Cypre is one of the changes the commission did go to approve last year. Thank you for that. I forgot. So now the cypre funding is isolated and different, and then once there's a meaningful amount, the staff will bring forward to you all a recommendation. So it does not get included in IOLTA distribution, because we have now, the commission has approved to change that declaration. So it's sitting in a different fund. When it accumulates a little bit more, we will come forward to you with a recommendation on how to distribute that funding. But that just happened November 1st, and we have not received a check since November 1st on it. But we have signed a couple declarations, so that new cypre will be coming in. It just hasn't yet. Okay, Monica, are there any other hands? Sorry, because I don't have visibility into. Is there anything?
There aren't. You can go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. So Monica, I think we're back on slide 12. Okay. Great. So here are those we usually do for you. Kind of three scenarios, and obviously you have at your fingertips an infinite amount. If you want to send us back and do more homework or take something in between this, this is all at kind of your discretion. So on the first scenario, we're projecting revenue there to be 183. Sorry. And then for no rate drop. So this would be the kind of what we call like the most aggressive, so that there would not be any additional rate drops for the year. So we end the year at 3.75%. B is what we're recommending. And we're projecting their IOLTA revenue at 177 million, and then we're projecting again 2 rate drops by December to bring us down to 3.25%. And then C, which is again what we call a little bit more of the conservative, we're projecting IOLTA revenue at $170 million and 3 rate drops to bring revenue down, the interest rate down to 3% by December.
So just one other question on that. Option C isn't really an option anymore because rates didn't drop in April, right? So that's kind of it isn't possible to have three rate drops. So it might be helpful to show a scenario under which, rather than there being 2 rate drops, there's only 1 rate drop for the remaining portion of the year, and eliminate option C, because option C can't be given what's happened.
Yeah, or I guess another way to think about it is there could be a still 3 rate drop, but it's not technically in April. That could be spread out. I mean, that was the idea. So again, we could do the 1 rate drop and send it to you, but I think when the staff talked, we are still with advanced B, even though there was not a drop yesterday. That was within our what we were projecting. So yeah, again, I think it's just about maybe thinking about it differently, but we can certainly then make option C when we send up to the commission as 1 rate drop instead of 2. So we're happy to do either way. Right, I don't think it change our recommendation, but we can do that for like presentation.
Well, I just note, like, there may not be the number of rate drops, but that nothing stops the Fed from dropping it more than 0.25% at one meeting, right? And given that Warsh is the new chair, there's a lot of divisiveness on the board, but there are some people who really want it to be like almost 0. It wouldn't surprise me if we see a big, it is not out of the realm of possibility that yes, there wasn't a rate drop this time, but that there's a bigger rate drop later in the year. But we can, it makes sense, I think, to Catherine's point, so that it looks more plausible that we assess it sort of that way. But so
yeah.
I would still, I guess I like that C anticipates a 0.5% drop by the end of the year. How you guys do, like, I have less knowledge of how that would, how that would eventually result. I'm just reading the news about Powell and Warsh and everything that's going on, but I do think it's good to have that kind of conservative option.
Well, B is the one with 2 rate drops with a 0.5%. C is the one with 0.75%. So
sorry, that's what I meant. You're right. What I mean is I think C should have a 0.75% rate drop, but maybe we consolidate it to 2.
Sure. Okay. And then the next couple slides, this was requested from the last year. Monica, could you advance? This has just kind of a granular of what it would the revenue for each year, each month, I'm sorry, for each of the options. So if you want us to key into either option, we can take a closer look, but that's the next like 3 slides. Okay. And then there's a section in the memo that kind of talks about like other revenues in context to kind of give you what's happening with kind of our other revenue streams. So there's a lot of unknowns right now. We do anticipate that EEF funding is going to be flat at around 35 million, 31 million right there for the EEF that's distributed through the IOLTA formula, and then partnerships another 3.5 million. CarePort, we expect that to be those numbers to stick. What we don't know is homelessness prevention. We do have a request out along with the Lulu Association of California that seems to be positively received. Whether that's going to come to fruition or not, we're not going to know for a few more months. And then, as you know, in terms of like the broader community, there are continual funding cuts at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. Foundations have also been contracting. So there's a lot of volatility, and that's driving the fact that we are asking for the $195 million distribution for programs, and also the 4-year spend down for this tranche as well.
Could we just go back 1 slide?
Sure.
I just want to make sure. So this shows the a December drop with a decrease of 12 billion or 12 million, I guess. Is that when we think of that drop, like that would be something that happened in December, but I thought that maybe I'm just mistaken, that the numbers we're projecting on end in December, right? Or it's, but I'm just trying, what's the period we're looking at for the next year for IOLTA distribution?
Monica, do you want to take that one?
I'd refer to I guess, the drop in December. So that's what our expected interest revenue would be.
But it's because we make our decision based on the funds as of December, right? So I don't think that full 12 million would affect next year's distribution because it's right. It's gonna not.
Yeah, you're saying it's gonna be like for January instead, right?
Correct.
For that drop. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and it's not there because I think that if you look at December, it's still, you see how it goes from November to December. And this is I should say it's a little misleading, like I said, because some banks pay monthly and some quarterly. So sometimes it doesn't always track like the interest rates drops and then programs and then banks, some of them are slower to drop when it drops and some of them are quicker to. So, but I think that it's reflecting what you just said, Catherine, because if you look at slide 14, our B scenario, you'll see there December's 13 million, even though we're projecting a drop there because the drop doesn't actually hit like you said.
So I just trying to get that consistency. Anyway, that's all.
Are there any other questions or comments? And the last the motion, but if we're happy to answer any other questions.
Just appreciating all the work everyone did for the information.
Thank you. So we will get those additional pieces of information and we'll fix up the April drop to make sure that that's kind of consistent with what's happening. Selena?
Well, because I didn't make the comment earlier, lack support staff recommendation of column B. And I think that once there have been updates to column C, I think it will make it easier for commissioners to understand that B is a very prudent recommendation. Yeah. Our community very much supports what feels safe on B, although if there's known revenue that comes in significantly larger, then A may be more appropriate. If January to March IOLTA revenue is significantly larger than the projection.
Thank you. I think it's already covered. I was just going to share that, to the point of staff's great work is also testament to that is the strong support from the community we serve, with a lot of the public comment received from some, very much established partners and organizations. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I mean.
I was going to echo the thanks to the staff and also make a motion. Or
Adopt.
make
What's your motion? Sorry.
I'll make the motion that was on about recommending to the commission that we adopt option B.
Second. Okay, Patience seconded. Let's go ahead and take our vote.
All right, Blakemore,
Yes.
Elkin,
Yes.
Judge Rosie, Escobedo,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Elseroff,
Yes.
Connolly.
Yes.
Okay, that's 6 yeses, 0 no's, motion passes.
Okay, and then I just want to be clear, like among the things, Duan, that you listed for updating in the slides, I didn't hear you mention the additional information just about the funds on deposit. So I'm just flagging that that would be helpful, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so relatedly, why don't we look at the Leadership Bank program, Sylvia?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my slide deck. Okay. Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a lead program analyst in the Office of Access and Inclusion. My name is Sylvia Nam. I'll provide a brief overview of the memo and highlight key areas for discussion if there's time, but also just wanted to give this as an informational item regarding the Leadership Bank program, particularly in light of some of the projected declines in IOLTA revenue highlighted by Duan. Okay. So as a high level, as you all know, IOLTA revenue is highly sensitive to interest rates, while the current political environment is highly uncertain. So following historically high revenues from 2023 to 2025, the office has projected declines as interest rates are expected to trend downward, including an estimated $34 million reduction in 2026 alone. So I'll know that the projections were developed a few weeks ago. Duan noted as of yesterday, the Federal Reserve maintained the federal funds rate, also known as the FFR, as approximately 3.5 to 3.75%. So because IOLTA revenue directly supports civil legal services, and with the anticipated declines reducing funding to legal services organizations, I wanted to raise some questions for this committee and for the commission. So the question is, what role can the Leadership Bank program play in stabilizing or ideally increasing revenue moving forward? And relatedly, how can we think about engaging financial institutions in the state of California as partners in meeting access to justice needs? Oops, no. So just briefly on background. Financial institutions, and this was also in Duan's slide deck, can comply with the IOLTA statute in 3 ways. There's going to be a lot of terminology and a few acronyms, and I'm happy to kind of hone in on them. But the first is comparability rate. This is the rate that banks pay on products, and it should be comparable to other products offered by that financial institution. Another way that financial institutions can comply with statute is comparability less fees. And the third is paying the ECR, or the established compliance rate. The Leadership Bank program was established by the State Bar in 2019 to encourage financial institutions to pay the ECR and waive fees on IOLTA accounts. The ECR is currently set at 68% of the FFR, the federal funds rate. Again, that rate is roughly 3.5% to 3.75%, or 0.68%, whichever of these rates are higher. The last time that the commission set the ECR was in 2008, so around the time of the Great Recession. State Bar Rule 2.130 gives the commission the authority to set the ECR. So leadership banks, and again, this is a distinguishing factor, is paying the ECR minus fees. However, there are a good number of institutions outside of the formal leadership bank program that pay the ECR, and they also effectively don't pay fees, making them leadership banks, at least informally or in practice. So a few key points about the current landscape. So IOLTA distributions, as you know, lag revenue by about a year, which is why the 2025 distributions appear elevated and that year atypically high. Balances, IOLTA balances are highly concentrated. So as the last agenda item showed, there are about $8 billion in IOLTA deposits statewide. The top 10 financial institutions hold roughly 70 to 75% of those $8 billion in balances. Third is that there's significant differences in the rates that each of these financial institutions pay. So comparability institutions pay on average 0.5%. In contrast, ECR and leadership banks pay on average about 2.7 to 3.0%. So that difference is quite substantial. And finally, participation is uneven. So leadership banks represent about 2/3 of all accounts. So this is about 30,000 accounts of the 50,000 IOLTA accounts in the state. But a meaningful share remains in lower yield comparability institutions. And these institutions actually can be the top IOLTA remitters in a given month, and that varies by month. So while the top three institutions, the top three remitters are Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase Bank, the remaining 7 institutions varies depending by month. But because of this this concentration, even small shifts amongst high balance institutions could materially impact revenue. So this is something that we projected with the help of Monica as well as Michael, is the memo outlines 2 primary areas for discussion today or at a later point. So one is ECR structure and rate setting. Other states, our peer IOLTA programs across the country adopt more competitive benchmarks. For example, I said that our ECR rate is 68% of the federal funds rate. Other states are 75% of the federal funds rate. And they oftentimes couple it with a higher floor. So I talked about it being 0.68%. Oftentimes these peer IOLTA programs have that floor at 1%. So almost 36 basis points higher. So potential approaches include increasing the ECR benchmark. Another is establishing a higher minimum floor. And the final one is establishing or setting a regular cadence for rate adjustments by the commission. The memo also discusses the idea of a floor with a trigger mechanism, which would take effect automatically when interest rates fall below a certain threshold, as we saw during the Great Recession, as well as the beginning of the pandemic. So as you see in this table, under low rate conditions, a higher minimum floor could significantly increase revenue relative to the current structure's lower floor, as in 0.68%. The second area is that of participation. So again, currently not all institutions, including high balance institutions, are participating at the ECR or the leadership bank level. Targeted outreach to those institutions could yield an estimated $16 to $23 million annually. And then another form of participation outlined in the memo is a leadership bank model with a tiered involvement participation structure. So one thing could be to differentiate institutions based on their contribution levels, if they participate at a higher versus the second highest tier. And then in return, provide enhanced recognition and other incentives, again, to think about them in partners in access to justice work. This model is used in other Office of Access and Inclusion programs, as well as in peer states. So just briefly on some of the considerations associated with these approaches that I've shared with you. So financial institutions may respond to higher ECR levels by shifting to comparability rates, right? They would go to that lower rate and then the interest levels would reduce and then in turn the distribution would fall. Another consideration is that participation by high balanced institutions is critical to realizing projected gains, as in they would have to be convinced that joining the ECR or joining the leadership bank was meaningful to them. With that said, messaging would then need to emphasize things like partnership as well as shared goals and things like Community Reinvestment Act aligned goals and credits that they can earn. So some of the analysis that I shared with you also assumes that targeted outreach can influence participation, and also that the ECR remains competitive relative to comparability options. And internally, this work would require coordination with related efforts in other parts of the state bar, including the recent CTAP, the Client Trust Account Protection Program, and recent efforts by our colleagues in the Office of Regulation in terms of bank compliance, as in, are they actually paying the interest rates that they purport to pay? So I'll pause here. I don't know if there's enough time for discussion, but I'm also I'll defer to those to see if there's any questions from committee members.
I just have a quick question. So when we talked about the IOLTA programs that you compared with that have a higher rate, well, I guess there's a certain number of IOLTA programs in the country, and I guess I'm just trying to understand the range of how they do things. I'm assuming these are the ones that are the highest, and how many are higher than what we do?
Sure. So just for background, we are part of the National Association for IOLTA Programs.
Yeah.
I am part of the banking committee. I have a chart that shows currently what their leadership banker rates are. On the upper range is Massachusetts, which is 85% of FFR. Oh, I think it's New Jersey, excuse me. States like Ohio, Oregon have 75% of FFR. Those are on the higher range. And then, of course, there's states on the lower range, so 55% of the federal funds rate. So the range is quite varied. And then similarly, the autonomy, the authority to actually establish a higher participation, a leadership rate is at the discretion of those respective IOLTA programs. So we're not at the highest range. Obviously, if I said 85% of FFR or 75% of FFR, we're closer to the top, but we're not at the bottom. So I would say we're right on the top, in the top tier.
Okay, that's helpful. And I guess I wonder in terms of process, I mean, this seems like a topic that's worth more discussion, and whether we would benefit from having like a subcommittee that maybe involves some of the current or former bankers that have given advice in the past about that, so that we could come up with an approach to recommend at a subsequent meeting.
I think from my perspective, I think like a multi-prong approach and a tiered approach makes a lot of sense. So cultivating relationships with the banking community through a commissioner with deep ties or expertise, I think is a great suggestion. Also, I think internally, because we have colleagues working with the compliance side, my understanding from the other IOLTA programs is that you have to have your compliance mechanisms really down solid before engaging banks to ask them to apply for additional ECR. So based on preliminary analysis from our colleagues in the state bar who do compliance, there are banks that don't pay what they say that they pay. And so we should then be able to then come to them both, carrot stick, and have the two sides working closely to be able to say, this is what you say you've played, and this is what we'd like you to pay. And then we can also help them identify CRA credits that they can receive so that they can meet their Community Reinvestment Act obligations. So there's a number of strategies out there.
And I'll just say this, this is all really preliminary research. I mean, so we put forth some, I think, intriguing ideas. We definitely need to do a lot more research there. And if we were going to move towards any, I think, semblance of a rule change, I think we have to engage with banks in advance of that to make sure that they don't then drop to comparable rates and not do something that would impact us negatively. We do have some models that Sylvia shared, but I really do like that idea, Catherine, or perhaps a working group and with some bankers that have been on the commissioner. We also need to start recruiting some more with our open spots to build that relationship with banks. So perhaps in the next couple of years, there could be more representation from banks on our commission.
Yeah, I guess one of the differences to me in California is something you said earlier, Dawn, which is the amounts on deposit are so much higher. So the amount we're generating, even with a lower percentage, is so much more. And that's just a piece that makes me worry a little bit about what banks' reaction is to going up from 0.68 to 0.75 or whatever it is. So I think it's just a calculus that one has to think about. I really appreciate you thinking proactively because, it's as interest rates decline, it's a strategy that we could embark on. And a strategy maybe would be like the one that Sylvia mentioned of sort of a gradual increase over time, right? That had automatic increases built into it in some ways that might be helpful and not like a shock of a big number changing all at once. So anyway, just a thought.
And we believe there probably is a sweet spot where if we go to require a little bit something more, that's not going to trigger too much commotion. What that is, we don't really know. So that's why we're not advancing right now any recommendation. We just want you to know, like, we're working on this and trying to come up with kind of creative ways to deal with the rate drop. I mean, the low-hanging fruit right now that we will advance in our office is that thinking about our communication strategy and how to package this. How to have like a set of flyers, PowerPoint on deck that, we can start interfacing with our legal aid community, perhaps law firms, to try to just tell them about the Leadership Bank program. If they are in a position to choose a bank, maybe they should consider one that's yielding us a little bit higher of an interest rate that will benefit the community. So I think those are things we can move on in terms of actual rate change. I think that's we're like still very far from that, but I really do like that idea of a working group.
And I guess I think, like, I don't know what types of firms have the biggest amounts on deposits. I am going to guess they're big firms, but I really have no basis for saying that. So it seems like if that's accurate, or if we have information about what types of firms have the most money on deposit, is it worth a conversation with a partner in the firm who might have a relationship with the bank and get their sense of approaches? And so kind of adding that voice maybe to the working group too, to get both sides, both the attorneys who putting money in and banks who are paying an interest rate based on that, so that everybody's kind of on the same page about the reason and the approach, etc.
Sylvia, I just wanted to wonder if you could clarify for my notes. So you said B of A, Wells, and Chase were the top three remitters. But did
Consistently.
you also mention not all three of them are leadership banks, or all three of them are leadership banks?
Those three, the top three remitters consistently, the ones that you just named, are top three remitters across the board in the top 10. And those are leadership banks. However, in other states, those three banks actually are not leadership banks because I mentioned that 75% of federal funds rate. My understanding is in states like Texas and Ohio, they do not pay that 75% of FFR.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, great. If you have other ideas, send them to us. Otherwise, we will think about what the formation of a work group could look like. And if anyone here is interested or has, a connection or a relationship with somebody at a bank that's in a senior level position, we'd love to kind of build that relationship.
Okay. Thank you, Sylvia, for that update. And it sounds like something we definitely will dig into more. And I appreciate the info on that. Let's move to 5.5, the update on the Community Justice Workers proposal and Senate Bill 1129. I think that's Jennifer.
Thank you, Erica. Yes. I think I know everyone, but to introduce myself again, my name is Jennifer. I am a principal program analyst in the Office of Access and Inclusion. So I want to give some background just as a refresher. In December 2024, a group of legal aid organizations led by LAC, One Justice, and Legal Link, the latter two of which were grantees at the time, authored a proposal for a California Community Justice Worker program. As a reminder, community justice workers, or CJWs, are trained non-lawyers who provide limited legal services to legal aid clients under attorney supervision within authorized legal aid organizations. As part of a larger agenda item, staff presented an overview of this proposal to the Commission at its May 21st, 2025 meeting. The authors of the CJW proposal then presented the draft in further detail to the PDI committee at its June meeting. After the author's presentation, the PDI committee formed a working group to review the proposal in greater detail. Following several working group meetings, at the October 24, 2025 meeting, the PDI committee approved the working group's recommendation for PDI to recommend that the Commission support the author's efforts to establish a CJW program in California and to provide the authors with written feedback in order to strengthen the proposal. The Commission subsequently approved these recommendations at its November 7 meeting. And the CJW proposal authors noted that they plan to add the letter to their collection of feedback and stated that they would keep staff apprised as they continued to advocate for a statewide program. On December 8, LAC, One Justice, and Legal Link petitioned the California Supreme Court to adopt proposed California Rule of Court 9.45.1, which would establish a statewide CJW program and authorize the Commission to develop an application and approval process for legal aid organizations to participate. The State Bar filed a response with the court in early March, stating it could not take a position on the concept or proposed rule of court because the proposed rule had not been considered by the board. The State Bar outlined 5 possible responses for the court to consider. I know Dwan has gone over these, but just to recap, those options were to decline to act directly on the petition and defer to the State Bar to decide whether to explore the concept. Second, to direct the State Bar to consider the CJW concept and to make a proposal to the court on whether to implement a program. Third, to approve the CJW concept and direct the State Bar to evaluate the proposed rule. Fourth was to approve the CJW concept and direct the State Bar to develop its own proposal. Or 5, to reject the CJW concept. The petitioners filed a reply later in March, urging the court to quickly approve the proposed rule and requesting an expedited public comment process. As of today, the court has not responded to the CJW petition. At the same time as all this is happening, on April 23rd, the Senate passed SB 1129, which was amended by Senator Caballero to direct the State Bar to form a working group to study CJW models in other jurisdictions and issue a report and recommendations to the legislature and the court by January 1st of 2029. And the bill has since been ordered to the Assembly. We will note that this bill remains what we would call a spot bill, meaning that the language is subject and perhaps likely to change. As staff's memo notes, a statewide CJW program aligns with the missions and strategic plans of both the State Bar and the Commission, namely to protect the public by increasing equitable access to and participation in California's legal system, especially for low-income and underserved communities. The Commission's November 7 resolution supported the concept for this reason. However, the Commission also noted several major concerns which the petitioners have not yet fully addressed, including questions about CJW discipline and professional obligations, as well as whether CJWs would be subject to the jurisdiction of the State Bar and/or the court. These questions merit clarification before the Executive Committee and Commission consider SB 1129. Additionally, the State Bar and the board have not taken a position on the concept of a statewide CJW program. Doing so while awaiting guidance from the Supreme Court would be inconsistent with the State Bar's response to the CJW petition. Additionally, Support for a CJW program via SB 1129 goes beyond the parameters for which the Commission is authorized to take a legislative position. And as a reminder, this is because the legislation would impact the State Bar beyond the Commission and would implicate the State Bar's general fund. Therefore, the Commission would be limited to asking the board to identify this as a legislative priority of the State Bar. Given the pending petition, as well as the possibility that SB 1129 may continue to be amended and could therefore potentially run counter to the court's authority, staff recommends that the executive committee, as well as the commission, await guidance from the court before considering a position for SB 1129. Staff will continue to monitor SB 1129 and will notify the commission as soon as the court publishes a response to the CJW petition. I'm happy to take questions if we have time, or defer to Dwan if you have anything to add.
I don't have anything to add, but we're happy to questions, or you have feedback or comments.
I have a question. What is it that's triggering our consideration of this issue today? It looks like there's multiple processes going forward. The State Bar has, peed in the corner and marked out its territory. Sorry. That there's and we're apparently gagged from taking a position, even though certainly the proponents of this idea have made it really clear this is kind of urgent, you guys. And the Supreme Court is, I don't know what they're doing. So I would love to know. I mean, it seems to me it makes sense for us to add our voice as an organization that thinks that this should move along. Somebody should make some decisions quickly so this can either happen or not. Selena, I'm anxious to hear how you guys are answering the questions that have already been called out. But why are we talking about this today? I mean, it's on the agenda for a reason. And
so Patience, I can address that. I think at our last meeting, in-person meeting, there was the CJW issue had come up, and there had been sort of a request to agendize this at XCOM and to consider whether there was more steps that we could take. And so I am working with staff, had decided, given the position of the bar, given the position of the petition to the Supreme Court, and given the position that 1129, the current bill might change, and really all it does is request a working group, that it doesn't actually authorize a CJW program, that in some ways the best option at this point was to provide an update consistent with sort of the request that we have, have an update about that at XCOM, but that there isn't really an opportunity for us to do anything at this point. We can't do the legislative proposal separate from the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has sort of, through the State Bar, taken its position on a CJW program via its petition, its response to the petition at the Supreme Court. What I was hoping that we could maybe discuss today is if, for example, 1129 goes through and there's a working group, there might be an opportunity for us to discuss what role we could play, how could we have a leadership position in that working group? What are things that we think we could bring to a working group if that's what happens? And if it does, change, that we could sort of have a little bit of a discussion about it. I hope that helped.
Somewhat. Has anybody been in conversation with Senator Caballero? Do we know what motivated this? some century in 2029, we're going to look at the, it just seems it's a really odd kind of set of dynamics here. So I'm going to be quiet because I bet Selena has all the answers.
Welcome to the legislative process. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, to echo what Catherine just said, Senator Caballero is very supportive of the idea of a community justice worker. For those of you who aren't aware of her background, she was a farm worker attorney with California Rural Legal Assistance, and really understands the need, especially in rural parts of California, to have people who are trained and supervised to provide this legal advice and information. But she and her staff are very aware that the Supreme Court is looking at the same issue. And we approached Senator Caballero to see if she was interested in working with us on this bill, specifically because we believe if the Supreme Court does act, we think that the Trust Fund Commission is the best entity to regulate the organizations. If the Supreme Court authorizes in some point in the future the individuals who can provide legal services. So for those of you who have practiced in the immigration area, we see this somewhat similar to accredited reps, where the accredited reps have the ability to practice law under CFR, I don't remember the number, but the accredited reps as individuals can provide these legal services, but there's also the DOJ has oversight over the organizations that employ and train and supervise accredited reps. So I think Senator Caballero understands that there's both the who can do the work that's under the Supreme Court's power. But because the authority of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission is in statutory language, your authority may need to be expanded to be able to oversee the organizations that work with community justice workers. And it's spot bill language because Caballero did not want to put anything that seemed to go sideways of what the Supreme Court may or may not do. LAC does not intend for there to be a working group over the next 2 years. It is an urgent issue, patients, as you said, but it's placeholder to kind of show the intent is to move toward, if approved by the Supreme Court, a community justice worker program in California.
Doesn't the legislature have the authority to just do this? Do they have to wait for the Supreme Court? Do they have to wait for the state bar? Can they just say, I mean, honestly, this is already happening. I mean, I don't know about anybody else's program, but in my program, there were plenty of non-lawyers who were providing direct services. I mean, essentially it would authorize what we're already doing under supervision, so, the legislation ought to say, this is declarative of existing law. Because certainly it's declarative of existing practice. So I guess I'm just confused about, is there no, this looks like a Gordian knot. Where's the sword?
I mean, I would be happy to talk more about how this is different than what's currently happening. I don't want to take too much of the time. I'm aware of time constraints, but the proposal, we're actually updating a website to make it really clear. But I think the proposal is similar to Alaska, in which they don't have to be employed by a legal aid organization. They are directly supervised by legal aid staff, but they may work at a tribal healthcare clinic at a food bank. And so that's the distinction here, is that it's adding more helpers who will be trained and supervised. So bringing people under what should be permitted and pulling them out of what's not permitted and perhaps bad advice under this system, and would have trustworthy individuals. We're including a lot of talking points, which you're all aware of, about why people don't go to lawyers, why they're embarrassed to talk to a lawyer, why they go to trusted individuals, why they go to friends and families and social workers and doctors and religious leaders, but they don't go to legal aid. And so we're really hoping that if this is approved, it will really draw upon what we know from the justice gap of where people go for help. And that could be the targeted places where we place community justice workers.
So what, we're stuck with the Gordian knot until somebody else decides to untangle it, right? Okay.
I mean, I think it's either the legislature has to decide to act in a way that would not be a spot bill, but affirmatively do something. And I think there's pros and cons, and I don't know that I at least could tell you where that would come out. And then there's the Supreme Court. But I agree, it also is not something that should have a working group figuring this out through 2029, because that feels like a long ways away and not something that's designed to help. I also agree, patients. I mean, my program used what we called advocates, which for other purposes were paralegals, but really advocates that did exactly that. But they were employed in our organization, and they were fabulous, and they did amazing work in areas that allowed our lawyers to focus on litigation and not do representation in daily IHSS hearings or Medi-Cal hearings or something else. So there's a really valuable role that can be played and expanded.
So is there something we can do to move things along here?
I don't think so, and that's the point. I think of the information today. This is not within our individual like authority for what we can like as a commission autonomously advocate to the legislature. We have a very limited scope of what we can autonomously do, and even in that situation, it can't touch, for example, general funds. And frankly, I'll just point out I support as community justice program. We, as a commission, signed off on that letter, but we did identify significant questions that we still have and things that need to be addressed in the proposal. I think that we have done the work we can, which is that we have said these are the things that needs to be addressed. We have already been on the record saying that we support a program more generally, but as to the legislation, we're not in a position where we can make that statement ourselves, and the Board of Trustees we'd have to go through the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees has already spoken on this in its petition response to the Supreme Court. So really, I think the ball is in the legislature's court and or the Supreme Court's court. And so, right, we're just trying to provide sort of an update and maybe get ourselves, ready so that once that Gordian knot, as you put it, is cut, we're ready to hit the ground running with whatever role everyone decides we should play. So we just wanted to provide an update on what's happening.
So now I'm trying to remember what 1129 says. It basically punts it to the bar, right? The state bar?
It does.
Okay.
I have the text here.
Okay, well, good to know, I guess. Next.
Yeah. Sorry, as I said, there been a request. We had looked into whether it was something we could do anything about. We could not. So I, working with staff, had put it on as an agenda item to provide information. So
Thank you.
We can move on, given that it seems there's not much we can do at this point other than wait and see who's going to cut the
Not
knot.
trying to be rude, but you know what? It would be helpful, Selena, as you guys resolve the issues that we've already identified. It would be very helpful to just like circulate that regularly, and maybe some of us would have a conversation as an individual, not as a veteran of this arena, and with at least with I don't know, although she's not going to be there very long, but at least we could find out like who her co-sponsors are. Maybe there's, I don't know. You must have your own strategy. We don't want to get in the way of that. But go ahead.
I appreciate any offer to talk with legislators, because you've been looking at this issue for well over a year with the working group reports to you. I will say that one of the concerns that we want to make sure that we address in talking to legislators is that we really want to clarify that CJWs would not charge for their work. They would be under the supervision of a lawyer. And we think this is really not a lesser form of legal advice. We think that CJWs actually perform better advice in certain situations if they're reaching into communities that otherwise wouldn't go to a lawyer. And we're hoping to increase referrals to legal aid organizations when the CJW does intake and realize it's not just the simple issue in front of them, it's actually a whole complex issue for their family. So we think that this actually could even result in more referrals to legal aid through working with other community-based nonprofits. But
I think Selena, one of the questions though is sort of the discipline piece, which is what I read the bar being concerned about. And I might say, like, these are people that, whether they're employed by legal aid or whether they're supervising someone in another organization allowed by the project, it's the attorney who can still be disciplined. And if that's the intent, I feel like beginning to think about, like, what does that look like and how does that work is helpful. And I mean, I think you untangled a piece of it to say the Trust Fund Commission would have oversight over the programs and whether they're doing what the program intends in the way that the program intends, but there might be this discipline piece that's helpful to resolve, because these are not people that could go out and practice law on their own. They have to be supervised. If they did do that, then I suppose they're covered by the unauthorized practice of law, but there's a current system for that already. So that's how I think about that issue.
Okay. I'm gonna move us if everybody's okay. I appreciate the points that we've made, but I'd like to get us to the 5.6 about the client complaints, and I'll turn it over to Chris. I know we're definitely gonna lose Amin in a couple minutes, and I can be late to my call, but I'd like to not be super duper late so we could move in. Thank you.
And 5.6 is a relatively quick item. I think I can probably do it in like 2 minutes, unless there are questions. So, the reason that this is on the agenda is because we have, and this relates to the public comment that we had at the start of the meeting. We had a complaint where a former client of a grantee, Learning Rights Law Center, exercised their right under the State Bar rules to have a commissioner advisory body look at how staff closed the complaint. So we're thankful that Commissioners Connolly and Al-Sarraf served on our 2-commissioner advisory body, and then the rules provide that that advisory body needs to bring its final recommendation to either the executive committee or the full commission, whichever meets first after they've made their decision. So that's why it's on the agenda. The information about the complaint was in the materials. So I think my main points are just that we do have a rule that sort of governs how we look at complaints. It's 3.692. Largely, staff and the commission confine their review to potential violations of trust fund program requirements rather than investigations of attorney misconduct, because that's in the purview of the Office of Chief Trial Counsel, which this complainant has also is also working with them, and we have referred them over and made sure that they knew that they could do that. So both the staff and the advisory body looked into the aspects of the allegations that weren't with respect to attorney misconduct, but more like compliance with grievance procedures, compliance with retainer agreements, intention to charge, was communication clear. Both staff and the advisory body didn't find any violation of trust fund program requirements. We've shared that with both the grantee and the complainant. I'll just kind of note for the record, both staff and the advisory body looked really closely and independently at what was called an attorney lien that the grantee filed with the court in the complainant's case, and has received the assurance. We've reviewed the documents. We've also corresponded with the grantee, and we've received the assurance that is there's no point where the grantee will be charging the compliant, and that was filed purely to notify the court of what the grantee's costs were in the case in the event that attorney's fees become available, and in the event it would be appropriate to award some amount of attorney's fees to the grantee. And it was just to sort of like state for the record what the amount was, but the grantee has assured us and the complainant, and the retainer agreement for this former client specifies that they cannot and will not charge them for the services. So that was kind of the one thing we looked at, like at length. And then upon the staff's and then the advisory body's review, both came to the same conclusion that there was no violation of trust fund program requirements. And then Erica and Amin can of course speak for themselves, but the recommendation from the advisory body is to dismiss the complaint. So that's my report back, unless there's any questions, or Erica or Amin, if you want to add anything.
Any questions on the recommendation?
Thank you for clarifying the lien portion of it. That was helpful given the comment earlier today.
Yeah. Definitely something we looked into.
Would like to move to approve the motion to dismiss.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Patience. Why don't we take our vote?
Yes, Blakemore,
Yes.
Belkin,
Yes.
Pedrosi, Escobedo,
Yes.
Elrod,
Yes.
Monserrat,
Yes.
Connolly.
Yes.
That's 6 yeses, 0 no's, motion passes.
Great. So everything else that's on the agenda are basically updates. So if everyone is okay with it, I would like to defer those to the commission meeting itself. Unless there are any concerns, I hope you don't mind if we adjourn on the early side today, having gotten our business done. Okay. Thank you all. See you all at the end of May. And
you have completely faded. You've faded away.
Oh, I was just saying that unless anyone objects, I'll adjourn early and we'll do updates at the commission meeting, which is all that's left on the agenda.
I second that motion.
Okay, great. All right. See you all. Thank you all. See you at the end of May. Have a good one.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.